everyone, and welcome to the thru Recovery Life Podcast. Today, we have Miss Judy from Delaware sharing her experience, strength, and hope, and here to tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So, without further ado, I give you Miss Judy in Delaware. Go ahead, Judy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Judy, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic today. I'm quite honored to do this podcast for the Zoo Crew. So I get to tell my story. I just had to say a few things about my background, and then I'll get right into the story. I grew up in a very affluent, 95% Jewish neighborhood, country club, jet set setting mentality. I lived in a neighborhood called Sky Lake in North Miami Beach, Florida. So I grew up in Florida. I'm actually was born in Miami Beach. And during my time with my family, I had a very contentious relationship with my mom. Heard lots of negative messages every single day that really greatly affected my self-esteem. Most of it was emotional abuse, but there was physical. And it was definitely I was the oldest of 4 children. So to qualify, my first drink I had at age 12 in 1966. So I'm going to date myself today. And my last drink was on May 17th, 2012. And I will build that into the story that I'm going to tell today. I'd also like to say that I qualify as a member, as a sponsee. I do have a sponsor who has a sponsor, and I have sponsees. And I'm very grateful for all of that in my recovery. So to begin with, I'll start with age 12. That's when I had my first drink. I grew up in a Jewish family, and it was a special holiday called Passover in the spring of 1966. And I was invited to the adult table. We had a children's table and adult table. And at that particular holiday, there were 4 different prayers for 4 glasses of wine. And I was not invited to have a glass of wine, but there was a lot left at the end of the dinner. And I and my cousin, my first cousin, Eric, slightly younger than me, we pretty much piled off all of the 11 other glasses of wine. He got very drunk. I didn't. But I can tell you from that first sip to my lips, I wanted more. Just so that drinking was definitely a very social thing with the way I grew up. At the country club, everybody got done with playing tennis or golf, and they drank. This was when I was around quite a bit. On vacations, there was a lot of drinking. The alcohol bills actually cost more than some of the housing bills. We would travel with a couple other families. At the age of 16, I dated a 20-year-old from a junior college, a gymnast, Miami-Dade Junior College. And so I was going to parties with 20-year-olds. And I proceeded to, of course, participate in all of the drinking. And I'm such a good alcoholic that I actually had to find alcohol that didn't make me sick, because there are certain things I was like clearly allergic to. They say we have an allergy from alcohol, but I also had an allergy, particularly to gin. So I found things that did make me sick to drink. At 17, I got kicked out by my mom. When I was time to go to college, she said, give me the key, pack up your stuff, and you don't have a home to come to. If you're going to come back, you have to come back with permission. I was only allowed to stay a few days at a time. So I headed for college at 17, and I was a very unhappy girl. My self-esteem was low, but when I drank, I felt happy. And of course, I did all of the college drinking, and I was underage, obviously going to college at 17. And somewhere time during that year, my first cousin that was 19 on my father's side actually died of an overdose of sedatives and alcohol. And what my family did is that nobody talked about it. They pushed it under the table. This is how we did. We were the all-American family. Nobody could know what was really going on in the family. So it was never discussed. It caused his mother, my aunt, to actually try and kill herself. She took a gun, and it was by grace of God that it didn't kill her. And she became one of the people in my life that tried to get me on a spiritual path, actually, after that happened. So in college, and then when I graduated from the University of Florida, I was always looking for Mr. Goodbar by night. During the day, I was a career woman, and by night, I was a different personality. And this continued for many, many years. 3 years into my career as a teacher, I got a job teaching on an Army base overseas in Germany. And basically, I taught during the day. And it was like being in a 2-year blackout, but I drank every day overseas, did other things also. But I stayed pretty much drunk for 2 years. And that was in 1980, 1982. Came back home to Florida to live in Gainesville, decided I was going to change careers. I went into mental health as a mental health therapist. And I worked with chronic schizophrenics. And frankly, I felt I really loved that job and kind of felt at home with those people. They were off the mark, and so was I. Somewhere, I decided that if I stayed where I was in Florida, that things were never going to change, and I'd never meet the love of my life, and I was never going to be happy. So my first major geographic cure after living overseas for 2 years, which of course didn't work, I packed my car, and this Florida girl that had never, on the coldest day of the year, January 5th, 1985, and had never driven in snow, had no idea what it was like, and headed for Massachusetts, where there was a friend of mine that said she got permission for me to stay on the Army base for 3 weeks while I looked for a job. And I drove around outside of Boston in some horrible weather, fearless, and interviewed for a lot of jobs. And then the snow was so bad that I couldn't go anywhere. It wasn't safe, there was so much snow, like literally like more than a couple feet, and didn't feel comfortable driving in that kind of snow. And the only place I was actually allowed to be on the base was without an ID, because I didn't have one, was either the snack bar or the bowling alley. And my friend moonlighted at the bowling alley, and she was a nurse on the base. And because there was so much snow, there was a tournament that she was asked to fill in for. And so I headed to go watch her bowl. That was it was January 26, 1985. And there was a gentleman that was there that was from Dover, Delaware, and he happened to be bowling next to her. And, I met him saying, if I can't bowl, I might as well get a beer. He got a beer, and we started talking, and, he met me, and they bowled the high game in the house, and he won $250 for the high game in the house, and we proceeded to drink that. And he was a one-night stand that turned into a 22-year marriage, a completely alcoholic moment. A complete alcoholic moment. I met him January 26, 1985. Took a train down to Dover, Delaware in February, and married him exactly 2 weeks later on February 9th, 1985. So that was in 1985. We were sent to Shepherd Air Force Base 4 months after we married. And the doctors didn't think I could get pregnant because I was over 31, and they thought that it wasn't possible for me. He definitely wanted children. I wasn't sure. I was a woman that met him and said, never getting married, never having kids. And here I am married to this Air Force dude in Shepherd Air Force Base, and I got pregnant. Everything was fine during the pregnancy. However, when there was time for delivery, and this is very critical to my story, is why I'm sharing it. She was born April 23rd, 1986. And I almost died there was an emergency cesarean. I almost died. They did revive her, and she died the day after Mother's Day of that year, on May 12th, 1986. So that is critical to my timing, May 12th, 1986. They sent us back home here to Delaware on a humanitarian so we could be with family. And then after losing that child, we actually bonded together, and I really wanted a child. So I had already not been drinking during the pregnancy, and we tried again, lost that child in the first trimester, but we're blessed with 2 more children. And here's where I could, I didn't drink because I'm a teacher. I saw alcoholic fetal syndrome up front, and I never, ever, wanted to compromise my children or risk their health in that way. So I was able not to drink during that, 4 or 5 year period where I was trying to get pregnant, or being pregnant, or nursing my children after birth. So I was blessed with 2 sons, one that was born in 1987 and another in 1989. Skipping forward a few more years, I have a sister that is a couple years younger than me. And she called me up one day. Literally, I got called out of my classroom. The principal showed up at my door and said, there's an emergency phone call for you. And that was before we had cell phones and before we even had phones in the classroom. And he, and I went to the front office, and my sister said that she had bought a car she didn't remember buying, and she was going to drive it off the turnpike down in South Florida. And I don't know, those were just moments from help from a higher power, to just say, Lori, get off, and go to a safe place. And the first safe place she went was a bar. And then she, and she went to, I guess they go to the next safe place. And eventually she got home. And I had, no experience in recovery, but this is a family disease. And remember, we lost our cousin. And on my mother's side, my other cousins were also struggling with addictions at the time. And she said that she wanted to get help, and she wanted to go to someplace up here. She was down in South Florida. And I told her, I gave her information. But I said, you have to make the arrangements. And she ended up here in Delaware at a rehab facility in June of 1992. And for me to be able to participate in the family program, I was told that I needed to go to Al-Anon if I wanted to participate and be part of her recovery. And of course, I love my sister. And, so that was, I was in complete denial that I ever had a drinking problem, or that I drank too much. I was the All-American girl that was part of the All-American family that, hid our problems really well. And I clearly remember when she was in that rehab thing, and she was doing her 4th step. And I remember being in this room, and we were knee to knee. And my sister gave me this necklace with praying hands on one side and the Serenity Prayer on the other. And she started to do her 4th step, and I was acting like a defiant idiot, I didn't realize it at the time, but that alcoholic personality in me. And the therapist that was in the room actually said, "You are sicker than your sister." And I remember just laughing that off. What? I don't have a problem. I'm not in a rehab, I don't have a problem. Nothing's ever happened to me. I've never had a DUI or accidents or been in a rehab or done anything like that. But that is classic Judy. Denying is just another form of lying. And so every time over the years, when I would go home to South Florida to see my family, all the triggers were there. My mother was there. The feeling like I was this nobody, that I was never enough. I was never good enough. Just feeling disconnected from my family. We couldn't even live together. So I always got a timeshare that was apart from my family. So they had no idea that I was drinking in the condo, because I would visit my family and they would just think that, everything was okay. They actually had no idea how serious a drinking problem that I had. And then I would go home, but I would binge so much and I'd come back to Delaware every time I went to Florida. And this was a long period of time from 1992 until 2012. So for those 20 years, I continued to go to Al-Anon. At first, the first 5 years, I was really, really dedicated to it. I did a lot of service. I attended regular meetings. And I just did not recognize that I had a problem. But then eventually I would go on binges. So I would slip away from the Al-Anon program and I would go on these 3-4 month binges of drinking because, I couldn't go into my, into the Al-Anon meeting and, be reeking from alcohol from the night before, because we couldn't let anybody know that Judy was actually struggling. And then they would ask me, where have you been? And I told lies. Oh, I've been teaching a college course. Oh, I have a new job. Oh, I was on a trip. I told just numerous lies. I never told the truth. But I would always go crawling back in, needing spiritual help, and I would get some in the Al-Anon program, because the Al-Anon program is the same 12 steps, except for one word in the 12th step where they change it from alcoholics to helping others, but the steps were the same. And I knew the language of the steps, but of course nothing connected because I was still drinking and I wasn't dealing with my issues. Alcohol was just a symptom of so many other issues. It particularly went on my binges starting in April of every single year from the time that, after I stopped having children. So 1989, July 1989. So starting in 1990 and every year up until 2012, when it came to April, that was the birth month of the daughter I lost. And I would go on this major deep end binge and I would drink out of sorrow, and I was angry at God. I was angry at all the circumstances that happened. I blamed myself, that I deserved that to happen. I was a very, very spiritually sick person that I did not recognize. And so I would drink all the way, April, May, and then it's I might as well keep drinking June and July, July 4th and all that. But the day of her death was May 12th, 1986. And my last drink was May 17th, which was 2012. And on May 17th, 2012 was my last drink, but I don't call that my sobriety date. My sobriety date is 5/25/2012, because I did not recognize. I knew that I drank so much that I was so sick that I was shaking before I put alcohol in, and I shook when I wasn't drinking. And I had a trip planned to go home to Florida to see my family. And I shook on that plane all the way and got down to Florida, and I was looking for an Al-Anon meeting, thinking, I'm home, I better go to an Al-Anon meeting. And My sister said, well, there's only, there weren't as many Al-Anon meetings as there are AA down in South Florida. There's amazing recovery in South Florida. And so she said, well, I really don't feel comfortable taking you to this out of the way place, but it's an open meeting and it's a speaker meeting. And at this point, I've been in and out of Al-Anon for 20 years. What I recognize is all my binges were in and out of relapses, multiple ones. But she said, hey, do you want to go? It's a speaker. And, would you like to come? And I said, I've never been to an AA meeting. So on Friday night, speaker meeting, May 25th, 2012, I went and it was called the Holiday Happy Hour. That was the name of their group. They met at 5:30. They had different meetings, and Friday night was the speaker meeting. And I remember, it says part of their format, that they read page 30 of more from the big book and more about alcoholism. And as soon as I heard these words, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. And when I heard that, and everybody in the meeting smashed their feet to the floor, and there was my wake-up call. And I looked at my sister and I whispered, I said, I'm one of you guys. And she goes, you're not an alcoholic. And I looked at her, but it was the meeting, and so we didn't want to disturb. And the speaker said, one of the things that I can still remember on that day was alcohol was fun. Then it was fun and problems. And then it was nothing but problems. And I was at that point in my life. Alcohol was nothing but problems. At that point in my life, I thought about alcohol. I taught in a blackout. I would think, the second part of the day, I made it to the morning, and after lunch and recess, I was an elementary school teacher. And then I would be thinking about going to the bar. And that was my life. And I had to drink every day. And I had to drink every single day. And I was just a miserable, unhappy person. And so we got to the car after that first meeting. And I'd never heard the traditions, and the third tradition says that, you can be a member if you have a desire to stop drinking. And I said to her, I have a desire. She said, when I said, you're not an alcoholic, she goes, wait, Judy. And she had 9 years of recovery at that time. She had 9 years. And she said, I'm wrong. Like, it's only for you to decide if you're an alcoholic. She goes, that was really wrong of me. I can't decide that for you, but let me ask you some questions. And there are some typical 20 questions that they ask. And I must have said yes to 17 out of 20 of them. And I said, yes, I have a desire to stop drinking and I can't. So she took me to my second meeting. And in that second meeting, we read in the big book, The Doctor's Opinion. And they talked about the manifestation of an allergy. And they talked about that this is a spiritual, a mental, and a physical disease, a malady that, that I suffer from. And, without spiritual help, that I probably, could not stay in recovery. And that spoke to me. That, Doctor's Opinion spoke to me in a huge way. The third meeting, and my sister doesn't like being a chip person, neither do I, by the way. And, but I had, picked up a chip, but I had, that the third meeting was a closed meeting, and you definitely have to identify as an alcoholic at a closed meeting. And my sister agreed to do the chips, and she gave me my white chip, and she said, pick up the white, stop the fight, pick up the white. And I have to say, I'm so grateful that on my first, since May 25th, 2012, that I have not had a sip of any alcohol. That it wasn't easy, It wasn't easy because then I got sober in Florida. I mean, my sister knew me, but I was at meetings that nobody knew me. And I was coming back to a small town. Dover is not a really big town. I had been already teaching here for, 20 plus years. And I was so worried and anxious about going to my first meeting. I knew that my life was unmanageable and I knew I was powerless over alcohol, but admitting that was still huge. This person who was emotionally and spiritually bankrupt, and I was so full of ego too, like, Judy's way. Well, Judy's way, wasn't working, and it took a long time to admit that. And I'm a control freak, and I was full of resentments and fear. And coming back to Dover, I was just so worried about, like who's going to see me there. And this is an anonymous program. And, I went to my first meeting, and I remember, they knew me as an Al-Anon member because that's because this is a small town. Actually, one of the meetings I was going to, I founded, and they would be on one side of the wall was Al-Anon and the other side was AA. And honestly, the last 5 years I was in Al-Anon, my ears were stretching to hear what's going on in the other room. I knew innately, intuitively that I had a problem, but I just didn't face it. So I came back to Dover at my first meeting, and I had, my sister said, you need to get a sponsor as soon as possible. And she was calling me up every day. Do you have a sponsor yet? No. Judy, you need to get a sponsor. Or, get a temporary sponsor then. So that's how I started, with the temporary sponsor. But at that point in my life, I had no connection to a higher power. I only had drinking buddies. I'd lost touch with some friends that cared about me. There were family members that weren't talking to me. And my sister kept repeating every time she talked to me. She would say, probably, which comes right out of How It Works, Big Book, probably no human power can relieve you of your alcoholism, Judy, And it really took me a while to believe in the power that was greater than myself. And I was at this meeting, and it was a Monday night meeting in Dover. And, there were all these people talking about this higher power. And I just kind of said out loud, kind of arrogantly, because that's who I was. I was not a pleasant, friendly, wonderful, warm, fuzzy kind of person then by that point in time. And, a lot of rough edges coming into the rooms and thinking that I'm not like any of those people. I had all the not yets. I had no DUI. I had no arrest. I had my job. I had my house. I had my bank account, I just said, I don't have a higher power. And, somebody said, why don't you read page 12 of the big book? Why don't you can develop your own concept of higher power. And then Judy, maybe you just need to start with, first of all, are you so arrogant that you think there's not a power greater than you? And I thought, no, I'm not that arrogant. I believe there's a power greater than me. And so he said, well, as long as you have the willingness, just have the willingness to believe that and if you don't believe at this point, can you believe that I believe? But I started with the group of drunks, that, GOD group of drunks. That's where I started with, my version of a higher power. And again, I was so relieved, when I read for the first time, We the Agnostics, what a powerful chapter that was. And on page 46, where it said, we find that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God. Just the importance of willingness. That's all that I needed, And then somebody told me, Judy, you have to stop trying to comprehend this power with your mind and just start accepting this power with your heart. And, that's where I went with that. It took me a while to really come to believe that a power greater than myself. It took me a while I did 1, 2, 3, the 1, 2, 3 waltz. That's what I called it. Step 1, yeah, I'm powerless. Step 2, came to believe that, I could be restored to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn my life, my will over to the power of God as I understand him. And I was like a ping pong ball, and I would just, then they would say, well, if you're not ready to take step 3, better back up to 2, and sometimes I had to back up to 1. In that first 6 months to a year of my sobriety, I struggled with that third step because of my controlling ways. And, but it started with it was rough in those first 6 months. And, and by the way, I shook, some people, just the after effects on my hands shook, and I felt so badly. But I did drink over a period of 46 years. But I remember my first spiritual awakening clearly, because it was about 3 months in, and we were at this, it was like an American Legion place where they had a wall, and had the bar on the other side. But there was this one of my buddies from AA. We kind of end up, he was given time off from work to like do his recovery. So we would go. And I was only working a couple days a week by that point. I was only teaching a couple days a week when I first came in. So we went to a lot of the same meetings. And I don't remember what the topic was, but, I just remember that all of a sudden it was like this fog and this cloud and this disbelief, things were lifted. And I remember turning to look at my friend, and we had a spiritual awakening at that exactly same moment. And he remembers it too. And I can say that third step prayer helped me a lot. I say it every day still, but in early recovery, I did the step 3 prayer and the step 7 prayer. And of course, the serenity prayer always helped too, but once I finally made that decision on step 3 and turned my will, that strong will of mine, that self-will run riot that, Judy, knows the plan, and finally realized that I needed some higher power, to help guide my life, and realize that I needed, that became my roadmap, that everything is in the 12 steps and in the big book, first 164 pages. Now that I also like the stories, but all the directions are there, so finally, that was my turning point. But then I have to say, I also went through a bunch of sponsors in my first 5-6 years. And I did a bunch of inventory step 4 in my first 5 or 6 years. And I wasn't honest. I was not honest. I was withholding. I was lying by omission, even with my inventory, because some of the worst things that I had done in my life, I didn't want anybody to know. I thought I would be judged, because again, I was raised with that Judy's the all-American person, and she has to represent the all-American family. And of course, some of the things that I did during my drinking and party days were not that. And, but sobriety had become a priority in my life. And it was starting to get better at that point in those early years. And I was more at peace. But my sister knows my whole story, because we are 2 recovering sisters. And she knew. She asked, did you say all in your inventory? Because she was one, when she first came in and out of the room, she started in 1985, when she came in 2003 or 2004 and stuck and stayed. But in and out, every time she'd hit that 4-step inventory, she, literally be running out the door, and not sticky in recovery. And so I knew that I needed to really find a sponsor that I could be completely honest with, because her favorite saying was, if you can't tell your sponsor everything, she's not the right sponsor for you. So I asked this one woman that I had listened to at many meetings and highly respected her recovery, because one of the things that impressed me that I say to the people I sponsor, she said, if I think I've got this, then, I'm at risk. Time does not eliminate the risk. I've never got this. Every day I've got to do something for my recovery. She's a very humble person. And she works a very strong program. And the first time I asked her to be my sponsor, after going through some that I fired and some who fired me, frankly, when I asked her to be my sponsor, she said that she just had too many and she couldn't. And then finally, weeks later, she called me back. It was like a few weeks before I was going to hit my 5th sobriety anniversary. And she called me up and she said, "Do you still need a sponsor?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been out there alone and without one, and that's not a good thing. I'm sponsoring people, but I need a sponsor." And she said, "Well, I don't need to take you through the steps because because that does take a lot of time, taking somebody, especially a newcomer, through the 12 steps. It takes time and it's a commitment." And she said, "But, if you just need a sponsor where you run things by me and we do some work together," she goes, "I can handle that." And to this day, she's my sponsor. So that was my 4th anniversary because, I celebrated my 10th anniversary, a decade of not drinking. I am so grateful for that on May 25th of this year, 2022. So we went back and did the work again. And when I finally really did a thorough 4th step, what a feeling of relief that was. It was, all of my defects were easier to acknowledge because frankly, in the past, I was holding up the defects. I had so many of them. There were so many survival skills that, through the abusive home that I grew up in and my troubled marriage and all of these things. And I was afraid if I let them all go, what's left, and this woman helped to, for me to realize that, we're all flawed and, where some of my, defects, liabilities actually could become assets, and it takes time to do that. And the more amends that I made, the better that I felt. I'd like to also say that one of the first amends I had to make was to my Al-Anon group. As I said, I got sober in 2012. I was supposed to come back and celebrate 20 years of being in Al-Anon. And I was signed up to be the host and to chair. And so before even, once we went through the early things of the beginning of the meeting, I just had to say, I said, I have to get honest. I don't feel comfortable. I've been lying to you. I've been lying to you. I have not been honest with this group. I got sober just a few days ago in Florida, but for 20 years I've been lying to you, and I don't think I deserved that XX coin. And they took a group conscience that day, right there. And they said, "But you've done service for 20 years. You've been coming to meetings for 20 years. We decided that we want you to have that coin." And I treasure that XX coin because one day at a time, someday I hope to get a XX from AA. But it does not happen without a lot of work, a lot of step work. A lot of healing happens though in recovery. This is a family disease. So there are some family members that I had not seen or talked to like in 8 years that I was able to, to visit when I was several years into my sobriety. Today we have a relationship, but then it was, I hadn't seen her and I got to meet my sister's children. And I remember that we had gone to church during the visit. It was actually around this time. It was around Halloween in 2014. But I hadn't had touch with her for so many years. And we went to church, and in the church they did the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord's Prayer was always very special to me at the meetings. That was the thing when we were holding hands, which we were doing, this was all pre-pandemic, of course. around in the rooms, there was this energy that I felt circulating and a beam of light that I felt that kept passing through me every time I heard the Lord's Prayer. So for somebody that walked into the doors of AA, had no God, no peace, to a person that now knows God and knows peace, to a person that came in with no hope, no recovery, to a person that knows hope today and knows recovery. I like to, end my share, and I want to thank you all for any of you that have stayed through the whole thing and listened. Between the letters B and D is the letter C. And B stands for birth. And D stands for death. And if I were to continue to drink, I would die. I know that. And thank goodness that AA was there and the people in AA were in there and extended that hand. Because of that, I was able to do C. And C stands for choosing to change. It is a choice. Choosing to change. That's what recovery is to me. It's transformed me. It's modified me. I've made amendments. I made so many amends to the people that I hurt in my life. And every day I have an attitude adjustment. To me, that's what it is. I have an attitude adjustment. And it's all because of that, what this program has done for me. And I just hope that each one of you that are listening, that the program does for you what it's done for me. And I thank you for listening.
Miss Judy, thank you very
Did I
much.
do okay, John? Did I do okay?
We're still recording. Thank you very much for doing this. You did better than okay. But full disclosure, had I known that you were a Gator, I don't know if I would have asked.
Why? Where are you from? Why are you a Central Florida or?
I'm a high school dropout, but my brother went to UM, so I'm a Canes fan. And and my wife is an FSU fan. So I live in a divided household. But the one thing we have in common, we both hate the Gators.
That's hysterical, John.
And then to top it off, I was in the Marines, and you married an Air Force guy, or we're staying
Air
on
Force. Yes, I did.
Air Force.
Yes, I married Air Force.
But I tell everyone to join the Air Force. I tell everyone, man, that's the place to go, the Air Force. No, Miss Judy, you did fantastic. Sky Lake Mall. I used to go to the Sky Lake Mall all the time. We moved down to Florida in '78, Miami. My parents still live off 183rd Street.
Are you kidding me? Wow. My first job was at the Sky Lake Mall. I worked in this men's clothing. Well, they sell jeans. It was called Oh Calcutta.
I think I remember it, but and what 3 hours ago? No, 4 hours ago, I didn't even know all that about you. Oh, what a quote unquote coincidence.
Yeah.
All I knew is that you were from Delaware, so I thought you were born and raised there.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly I could, but I don't know how long I talked. Probably we're over 20. What was it? About 30 something minutes, maybe?
Yeah, close to 40 by the time we finish.
Yeah, there's a lot more ins and outs to the story, but I was just trying to.
Well, go back and tell us, please. I haven't stopped recording, so continue on.
Continue. Oh, continue on.
Yep.
You mean to?
You said there are more ins and outs, so if you want to tell us, continue on.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just start with what's happening today. Is that good? Because really, I have a lot of health problems, a lot, and I've been living, and I live with a lot of pain, and because of what happened when I almost died, I had a very violent reactions to anesthesia, and they never figured out. And it's, so for the 35, 38 years, there's been all of these things, mysterious allergies and things that have happened. And all I can say is thank goodness that I am sober, because my go-to would have been, numbing all that pain. And actually, I think it's a good thing, given that I'm a pretty serious alcoholic, that I am actually addicted to opiate. I mean, not addicted, excuse me, allergic to, that was a good Freudian slip, allergic to opiates, where my throat closes, and I, almost died from some, after some dental surgery. So today, I'm in that where I've been doing a lot of step 11, continue, making sure I have conscious contact with my higher power every single day. And, making sure that I stay connected to the fellowship. And, it always helps to help somebody else, when I'm struggling. And I considered that if I were not sober, I would be dead. There's just no question, because I would have just given up. And in this program, there's the how part. Got to be honest, open-minded, and willing. So, I'm honest about my story always, but an open-minded, and, in my case right now, to be, to try, to, not live in fear of, trying some new treatments or seeking new doctors. But nothing is simple. Like, for instance, next month I have to have cataract surgery. I'm actually allergic to local anesthetics and medications that they give. And, I could live in this tremendous amount of fear, but where I live today is at this 24 hours. I live in 24-hour blocks at a time, because if I start thinking about all the what ifs, even like for my surgery that's scheduled, then I'm not going to live. And this program has taught me how to live in 24 hours and to enjoy it and to be grateful. That's part of it. Also, I'm really big on, part of my story is that when I was only 2 years sober, and maybe it's because I really, delve into philosophy. I actually I have a minor in religion from the University of Florida. I have a minor in religion. I have a couple of degrees. I don't talk that doesn't matter about that, but I've always been interested. I was always seeking a spiritual path, just from the time I was 17 and kicked out from home, just trying to find my place in the world, so to speak. And, but I was 2 years sober, and there was this man, and he used his full name, so I can't. His name was Joe Talley, from this area. And he used to give speeches and everything, on the history of AA. And, I asked him if he would take me through the traditions, and he was terminally ill with cancer. But that man, and he was like my model. No man, he was very ill, but he said, first of all, I'm impressed that somebody who's only 2 years sober, he wants to learn about the traditions, and just all the energy that he put into that. We really delved into the traditions, which we didn't have the groups. We could all wither and die. And the traditions about keeping the groups alive, the step work is what we do as individuals. But that impressed me, because he still put other people first, or, he took care of what he needed to, but he always did service. And, when he actually died at his funeral, it was like going to an AA meeting. It was wonderful. And he said two things that I always remember. He used to say, it's hard to be grateful when you're hateful. He always talked about the importance of gratitude. And that's where I sit every day. I either consciously, in my head make a gratitude list, or I actually write it down. And I hear so many good things in the meetings. Let me tell you, I've been, since I found the zoo crew, I've been writing a lot of wonderful things that I'm hearing in the meetings that, stick in my head, are going to help on a bad day or a rough moment. I haven't been to your meeting yet, there's bad moments, but not bad days or whatever. I know that I'm just paraphrasing that, but he was like a guide. And the other thing he said was, I live on the corner of serenity and peace. And it took a while. So I don't want anybody that is listening to, to this podcast, to think, oh, I'm struggling, I'm never going to get there. It's work, but it's so worth it. Yes, it is. It's work, but it's work that I've got to do every day, because then I'm not good to myself, my family, or anybody I want to help in AA. I really believe in that responsibility clause of AA. When anywhere reaches out, I want a hand to be there, and, let it begin with me. That's Al-Anon and AA. But that we are, and for that in AA, I am responsible, and I fully believe in that. I am sponsoring quite a few women. So that's why when I hear in any meetings that I, attend, and that's why I can only do virtual. That's why I'm very grateful that we have this format. I am grateful for technology. And I'm grateful that we have this place, and it's fascinating, and we can literally meet people from all around the world. And I've gotten to, I'm virtually sponsoring 4 women, and that I've met. I mean, some I've already taken through the steps, because during this we're on our 3rd year of the pandemic, so they've been sober for a while. And I'm also sponsoring 2 women that I'm taking through the steps. But when they do the work, so do I. And I think that keeps me grounded, sober, sane, serene, and happy. So I encourage anybody, don't, jump right in. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if I have 10 years or somebody has 20 years, it doesn't matter. I need to do something concretely every day for my recovery. And that's how I can stay grateful, because, and my sponsees know that one of my favorite sayings is, hey, don't slip off the beam, because that's easy to do. You can get a nasty attitude. You can feel poor me. That self-pity thing. My sister would tell me when my first year of recovery, because I was having a lot of health issues back then, even in 2012. She said, I don't need to hear all that. If you keep, sit on the pity pot too long, you're going to get a ring around I hope it's okay to say, your ass, because that's what she would say. I would say, I don't have 1 ring. I have like 4. Well, today I'm a happy individual, because this is recovery is not a destination. There's no end point. It's a lifetime. It's a process. It's a lifetime process. And I'm just glad to be part of it. And now I think I've shared enough.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. And, I used to love to go to in-person tradition meetings, because they were always small. So many people, don't see how the traditions benefit them. But I love traditions meeting. We used to do a step meeting and a tradition. Well, we used to do a step meeting on Wednesdays, and then after running the cycle a few times, we started doing a traditions meeting that I used to host on Wednesday mornings at the 8:15. I'm gonna do a podcast on the 12 traditions, and I eventually bring back the traditions meeting, because this is if we want AA to be around for our great grandkids, we have to abide by the traditions, as you know. like you said, the steps are for us, and the traditions are for the benefit of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, I came in on May 2012, and so that was the fifth month, and the fifth tradition was quite important. Committed to God. No, that's step 5. Sorry, that doesn't matter. That applied to committed to God, ourselves, and not even be the exact nature of wrongs. It took me a while to really do a full step 5 too, but boy, what a difference it made. No, tradition 5. They read that at in the meetings. Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And those people in the holiday happy hour down in South Florida, and what I don't know the name of the church, gave me my first big book. Their group conscience was that they gave new people. It was this, not the large, a small big book, and that was my first big book. And and I believe that I guess that's why I don't share at every meeting, because sometimes it's good to just listen and whatever people say. But I believe that sharing is part of, and I believe that everybody who shares it God is talking through them. And, so, obviously I'm getting the message, and it's important for me to carry the message, carry on that tradition. But yeah, John, I think doing traditions, the podcast on traditions would be good. And this is true. Somebody would say, yeah, you set up for a tradition meeting and you don't count on very many people to be there.
Yep, they were always small.
Yes. And then, I do a lot of service already, and I'm also part of another organization that's not related to AA. So I feel, I'm involved in a lot of service. That's why I haven't volunteered my time with the zoo crew. I feel like because of my health, I know that my sponsor would say she wanted me to I was doing too much, and what I'm doing right now is about the right level. But I come in as a willing and participant and listener and a member at this point. And if things ease up a little bit, I would be glad to do more service, because that's really important. And that, that's so much a part of my recovery, is doing service.
Right, Miss Judy, I appreciate you taking the time. So stay with us. I'm going to stop the recording now, but thank you. Any parting words?
Stay sober strong.
Right, fantastic. Thank you, Miss Judy.